Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Thursday, April the 4th, 2024. In a few days' time, there is a total eclipse of the sun, and I believe there's going to be an arc across the United States where at the time of the eclipse there is going to be a level of darkness. You will be able to see it, and I know that there's a lot of excitement about this eclipse, and in this video I want to have a look at this eclipse from an astrological perspective and consider what it might mean, where it might affect us, and I'm going to ask the question, how much of a big deal is it really? Because I know a lot of people are getting excited about it, and I think they've wanted me to cover it. I think I did actually talk about it a couple of months ago, but I will be looking at it again. I also want to look at the earthquake in Taiwan. Last time I looked at the news about it, I think one person had been killed and some buildings had collapsed. So yes, it's always a good idea to look at earthquakes if they've just happened. I believe this was quite a big earthquake. Was it something like 7.5 on the Richter scale? So yes, I'm going to look at that astrologically. But before I do that, I want to look at the astrology and the I Ching for today, which is Thursday, April the 4th, 2024. So this is the horoscope for today. I've set it for noon in New York for today. And we can see that the moon is still moving through Aquarius. So with the moon moving through Aquarius, we think about this placement as being fairly rational. Moon in an air sign. There is a certain amount of detachment there. We don't want to get completely emotionally involved in what is going on around us. After all, the moon is in an air sign. Still, the moon is also making a square aspect to Jupiter and Uranus. So moon in Aquarius square the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction. What does that mean? It's going to suggest a little bit of excess, exaggeration, particularly that moon square Jupiter. Jupiter tends to exaggerate everything it touches, but this square is in fixed signs, so it's not as crazy and crazy and all over the place as, say, for example, if you had Moon in Sagittarius and Jupiter in Pisces. It's going to tend to go in a single direction. There's going to be a tendency to store things up. We're not going to have outbursts, for example, unless we really have to. But as with all the fixed signs, there's a tendency to break rather than bend. So if we reach a certain point, if we really feel that we're not making any progress, that we're getting a lot of resistance and even unpleasantness from the outside world, there could be a certain point at which we break. Or at least it might not be us breaking, it might be someone else breaking. And that would be Moon square Jupiter square Uranus. Though I suppose there's a positive side to Moon square Jupiter and Uranus. Indeed, it can be positive. Jupiter-Uranus is a very positive energy. It's about freedom, wanting to express ourselves, and perhaps a sudden sense of relief. Maybe that's what we're going to feel when the moon makes that square to Jupiter and Uranus. Growing tension, and then suddenly it's all okay. Suddenly the dam bursts, and we're feeling a whole lot better. And at the same time as the moon making this square to Jupiter and Uranus, it is making a sextile to the sun. In fact, just before it makes the square to Jupiter and Uranus, the moon makes a sextile to the sun. I think that moon sextile sun is really very fortunate, and it shows a nice balance. Moon in Aquarius is about perhaps thinking about things, having ideas perhaps that might be emotionally derived. We should remember that Moon is a fairly emotional planet. And then sextile Sun is about action. And so it may be a time when we can have thoughts and feelings about what we should be doing, and then having the opportunity to put theory into practice. And matters are helped by the fact that the Sun is conjunct the North Node. In astrology, the North Node is supposedly where we're supposed to be going to, and the South Node is where we're supposed to be coming from. And today, the Sun is exactly conjunct the North Node. It's in Aries. It is about action. So for many of us, we may be in a situation where we feel that we have to do something, but it is the right thing to do. Possibly something that we're a little afraid of. Now, I'm not talking about anything really stupid, taking physical risks. It's perhaps taking social risks, perhaps, or we risk making a fool of ourselves. We always do that, don't we? We risk embarrassing ourselves, perhaps doing something, and we're concerned that we can't see it through. But with Sun conjunct North Node in Aries, it perhaps is asking you to take social risks, perhaps making a phone call that you haven't really wanted to make, trying to get in contact with someone important, depending on the situation, applying directly for a job. That is scary, having to perhaps call someone up and ask for a job, something like that. Or if someone owes you money, asking them for money. Maybe soliciting charitable donations or political activism. Depends on the situation, and it depends on your life. But if in doubt, it does seem that it is the right thing to do, to take that social risk. I say social risk, it doesn't necessarily have to be a social risk, but I want to make it clear that I'm not talking about a physical risk or a risk of people really coming to harm. With the Sun conjunct North Node, you need to drive carefully, and you need to drive within the speed limit, for example. But overall, that I think is the Sun conjunct the North Node. But there is pressure to do the opposite, because the South Node is in Libra. The South Node in Libra is about doing what is easy, making people comfortable, making ourselves feel comfortable. Not rocking the boat. But that South Node in Libra is representing, I think, the past, something that is easy, the line of least resistance. But I don't think is a path we should necessarily be going down. Other things going on today, I should say that the Sun is decile Uranus. So Sun is you can see that the Sun is around 36 degrees from Uranus. So decile, the attempt to create a particular style. And this may be a hint about how we can get things done. So Sun decile Uranus is the principle of action, but action which is about shaking things up, which is about getting people to sit up and listen. That's Uranus. But it's a bit of an effort. It doesn't come naturally because it's a decile. Deciles are about the attempt to create a particular style. But maybe if we want to get results, that's the Sun conjunct the North Node, if we want to take the initiative, we may have to make a special effort to get people's attention. People maybe it's just difficult to get people to sit up and listen. I mean, there's so much going on in the world. It's hard to be original, isn't it? But maybe we have to make a special effort to be original so as to get the attention we need, and then perhaps we can make our demand, whatever that demand might be. There are some midpoints to consider. So we already know that the Sun is conjunct the North Node, and the Sun North Node conjunction is on two midpoints. I mean, it's on other midpoints, but two midpoints really stand out. It's on the Mars-Uranus midpoint. You can see the Sun there, and actually you can see that it's almost on the. You've got this Mars moving towards a conjunction of Saturn. I won't say anything about the Mars conjunct Saturn at the moment. It's still not exact. I've talked about it before. I think I'll be talking about it a lot more in a few days' time. But there's Mars, and Mars and Uranus. So, in fact, there's a really interesting pattern forming here. Let me explain it. Can you see the symmetry here? There's actually quite an incredible piece of symmetry going on. You see, there's a Mars-Jupiter conjunction forming, and there is a Jupiter-Uranus conjunction forming. Now, there's Mars and Uranus, and there you've got Sun on the Mars-Uranus midpoint. Then look at Jupiter and Saturn. Each one is a few degrees closer to the Sun. So there you have it. There's a Sun on the Jupiter-Saturn midpoint. So that symmetry really does need to be taken seriously. I hadn't really taken it on board until just now. But it's the most important thing going on today, I expect. Sun and the node on the Mars-Uranus midpoint and on the Jupiter-Saturn midpoint. I'm not necessarily saying that midpoint configuration is going to have an impact on us personally, but I think it could be more about what's going on in the world. I would have said that it is potentially quite dangerous. I think there could be some happenings today of a Mars-Uranus nature. What's Mars-Uranus about? Mars-Uranus is about maybe explosions, not just explosions literally, but just explosive events in the world which grab people's attention. But then you throw in Jupiter-Saturn. Jupiter-Saturn as a pair is the economic cycle, it's the business cycle, it's how people are thinking about the economy. So the Mars-Uranus conjunction is feeding into the the Mars-Jupiter midpoint is feeding into the Jupiter-Saturn midpoint, and yes, the Sun and the node are both hitting them. So that is a big deal. On a personal level, the Jupiter-Saturn pair is about the economic cycle. And I think if we look at the news, particularly the business and economic news, we're going to be having some thoughts about whether things are really going as well as governments tell us and tell us they are. And we may be wanting to make some preparations because we can perhaps see that in the end, the business cycle could be affecting us. So yes, don't underestimate this. In fact, I want to just put this on the 90-degree dial to show what you mean, to show you what I mean, just to give you a different view of it. So I'm talking about the Sun here. This is the 90-degree dial. I mean, don't worry particularly about the details of this. It's a dial that makes all the conjunctions squares and oppositions conjunctions, and all the semi-squares and sesquiquadrates oppositions. So we'll put the Sun on the pointer here, and there you can see there's the Sun, and you can see the symmetry around the Sun. So there's Saturn, and there's Jupiter, Saturn. That you can see the symmetry there. In fact, you've got the Moon tied in with it as well. And there's Mars, Uranus. So this is what the Sun is doing. It is on the Jupiter midpoint. It's on the... Sorry, the Sun is on the Mars-Uranus midpoint. I don't know if you can see that. It's on the Mars-Uranus midpoint. It's on the Jupiter-Saturn midpoint. And in fact, it's on the Moon-Saturn midpoint as well. For a short period of time, because the Moon does go quicker from other planets. So that's the main thing going on today. The Sun is really hitting the Mars, Uranus, and Jupiter, Saturn midpoints, and the Mars, Uranus midpoint is exact at noon, pretty much exact at noon in New York. So it could be a dramatic day, but as I said, not necessarily on a personal level. So I should also look at things from a heliocentric perspective. So from a heliocentric perspective, let's switch things around. So this is the solar system with the Sun where it should be, the Sun in the middle of things. Like yesterday, the Earth in Libra is trine Mars in Aquarius. So that's quite an energetic trine. It possibly links with the fact that the North Node and the Sun are on the Mars-Uranus midpoint. It's more of the same. When you see a trine heliocentrically, don't just think, oh, that's a good aspect, that's nice. It's just about Mars having an impact on Earth. Mars is a planet of assertion, aggression, anger. People are going to want to get things done, and things might happen perhaps of maybe of an aggressive or even violent nature. So I would not have said that Mars-Uranus square was entirely fortunate. Let me say it again. I wouldn't have said that Mars trine the Earth trine the Mars was necessarily a good thing. It could just make things more difficult. If things can go wrong, perhaps they will go wrong. And at the same time, Mercury is opposition Neptune. Mercury in Virgo, opposition Neptune in Pisces. Remember, from a heliocentric perspective, Mercury is a fast mover. It could move sort of 6 degrees, something like that, a day. It takes, I think, 88 days to go around the Sun. So Mercury opposition Neptune creates a little bit of confusion there, I think, which we need to be aware of. And if people try to do things, they might find that it's hard work. And hard work, not because it's difficult, but because we get the wrong end of the stick. We get deceived and we go chasing fantasies and end up getting nowhere, or worse still, we might have a misunderstanding of a particular situation, and as a result of that misunderstanding make mistakes. So we do have to be careful with that Mars-Neptune heliocentric opposition. Oh, I should also point out that Mercury is not just opposition Neptune, but Mercury is trine Jupiter. I think that Mercury trine Jupiter has to be fortunate to an extent. It is Jupiter. So Mercury trine Jupiter, this may be a good time for perhaps telling people what's on our mind, perhaps even getting our message across. And that provides a counter to Mercury retrograde. I know we go on and on about Mercury now being retrograde, and it's difficult to It's difficult to express ourselves properly. This is a heliocentric chart. In a heliocentric chart, Mercury never goes retrograde. Nothing goes retrograde. Things just move around the sun in a single direction. And perhaps with Mercury trine Jupiter, it's a good time for us to be able to express ourselves. So that's a heliocentric chart. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to look at today's astrology from the perspective of the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for today, which is Thursday, April the 4th, 2024. Aries. I think, Aries, that you're now really ready to make things happen. I think that things finally are configured in the right way. After all, the moon is in Aquarius. It's making a sextile to the sun. And of course, the sun is in Aries. It's in your sign. And moon sextile sun can represent harmonious activity. So if you make a decision to do something, I think it's very likely that it is going to work out. And remember that the sun in Aries is now exactly conjunct the North Node. Aries, you have a strong sense of what you should and should not be doing. What you should be doing is taking the initiative. Typical Aries. That's what Aries is all about, isn't it? Taking the initiative. You certainly should not be being a follower, meekly doing what you're told, trying to compromise, trying to avoid a conflict. No, that's not the right approach. But there still might be a little bit of a temptation to go in that direction. Completely uncharacteristic, but still the temptation could be there. But I think, Aries, you know what you should be doing. I think that is very clear. So if people are waiting, now is the time to break the deadlock. You may cause a bit of unrest and upset. I mean, after all, the moon is in Aquarius. That can be about presenting people with concepts, ideas and plans that they're not fully comfortable with. Perhaps because you're thinking ahead. You're almost a voice from the future. You can see the way things are going. And as far as you're concerned, it's a good idea to take action now rather than to leave it any longer. And your impact on other people should be considered. I think that you will shake people up a bit, but I don't think it's a real problem. I think people in the end will accept you and will accept that you've got something very original to say. Not just original, but important. And it's not just about saying, because today is about acting rather than just saying what's on your mind. And I suppose it's a situation where the first action may have to come from you. You show the world that you are doing it. If they want to follow you, that would be great. If they don't want to follow you, that's not your problem. That's not your responsibility. And so I think that's the way it should be going. So it looks like being a powerful day for you, Aries. But yes, it's important that you think for yourself. And that particularly relates to money. There may be a possibility that some people's have ideas about money and spending money that are not particularly sensible. That's because the moon is making a square to Jupiter and Uranus. People might have sudden ideas that money needs to be spent. And perhaps they're going to want to include you in their financial plans. Perhaps there may be pressure on you to spend some money. Possibly in a social sense. Perhaps, I don't know, going to a theatre, going to a restaurant, signing up for something. I would resist those kind of pressures. If you actually look at it, the money, it's just too much money. Of course, it may not apply to you, but if there is pressure, but especially from your friends to spend money, even if it seems a bit of a trivial amount of money, it's not as trivial as it looks, because every bit counts, as they say. So yeah, avoid temptations to spend excessive amounts of money, or even unnecessary amounts of money. If money doesn't need to be spent, and you're being pressured to spend money, then resist the pressure. I think that is important. And continuing on the theme of relationships, Venus is a planet which is particularly important for Aries in terms of relationships, because Venus is the ruler of Libra, your opposite sign. And Venus is now in the last degree of Pisces. It moves into your sign very, very soon. In fact, if you're in New York, Venus moves into Aries, I think it's at midnight, Friday midnight, tomorrow at midnight. If you're in the West Coast, Venus moves into Aries tonight. That's, I think, at 9 p.m. But I think for most of us, okay, I'm in Washington State. So in Washington State, yes, today Venus moves into Aries at 9 p.m. But I think overall we should perhaps be seeing Venus moving into Aries as more of a thing for tomorrow. And it's just a reminder that some people, particularly the people close to us, are in a process of change. At the moment, they may seem a little bit indecisive, but that is not going to last forever. Venus moving into Aries, you start to deal with people and you start to see how decisive they can be. But that doesn't mean to say that they're going to be pushing you around. As I'll talk about it, I'll talk more about it tomorrow. But Venus moving into Aries is more like Venus moving into your zone of control. Someone is starting to think that maybe you're worth getting to know. Maybe you can already start to see this person on the fringes, someone starting to appear on the horizon, and it's a person who is going to have more and more influence on you. But for today, at least even for most of the day, if you're in the West Coast, California, Oregon, Washington State, completely tomorrow if you're further east. But today someone does seem to be confused as they make that transition from Pisces to Aries, and they may need a little bit of help, because Venus is not just in the last degree of Pisces, it's on a fixed star called Scheat. Scheat, often connected with shipwrecks and disasters. So it may be that there's one person who's skirting disaster. They're doing something a little bit dangerous, and maybe you have to intervene and bring them back into line. So be aware of people doing stupid stuff, and maybe it's your responsibility. In fact, not maybe. If you see someone doing something stupid, it is your responsibility, Sun conjunct Aries conjunct the North Node, to do something about it. Taurus. I was just talking about Venus when I was finishing up with Aries. And Venus is your ruler. And Venus is on the verge of changing signs from Pisces to Aries. Tomorrow, Indeed, could be 9 o'clock this evening if you're in California, or kind of California, Oregon, Washington State. This sign change is important. Is it going to be a good thing? Well, it's going to be mixed. Venus has been in Pisces for some time. So Venus has been exalted in Pisces. So from a Taurian perspective, with Venus exalted in Pisces, you may have had a certain amount of sensitivity recently. You may have had a fairly good understanding of what was going on in the world. And you were able to show sympathy and consideration to your fellow human beings. Venus moving into Aries, well, that does create a different picture. I think you will be, all things being equal, less sensitive. Your focus is going to change, and you're going to be more into sort of what kind of action you can take. And I'll be talking more about that tomorrow. But as far as today is concerned, I think the key thing to point out is that, Taurus, you're in a process of change. And because you feel in a process of change, it may be inappropriate to make big commitments. I mean, we already have Mercury going retrograde. Mercury going retrograde, not a good time to be strongly committing yourself to any particular course of action. And right now, with Venus about to change sign, the message is the same. Venus is also on Scheat, a fixed star connected with disasters and shipwrecks, particularly relating to water. So, Taurus, I would suggest that you're very careful with anything to do with water. It's certainly not a day for going boating. It might sound like a fun thing to do, but definitely not something you should do. I mean, I'm not saying that there's going to be a complete disaster, but something might go wrong. And water in general, whether it could be plumbing, being too close to water, I think that should be avoided. And don't feel that you have to sort out plumbing problems yourself. In fact, you shouldn't be sorting out plumbing problems yourself unless you are an expert. So, Taurus, that is something that you really have to bear in mind. Though, on a different note, the moon is in Aquarius, and it is sextile the sun. I think that from a Taurian perspective, that is good news, provided the energy is handled correctly. With moon in Aquarius, you have your own ideas about where you want to go, how you want to proceed, especially in the sense of your public life, whatever that public life is. I mean, I suppose in most cases that's going to represent your working life if you're going to work today. But if you're involved with other people in society, it's all about how you move forward. And you're going to be quite independent-minded about it with Moon in Aquarius. You're going to have a clear sense about what you should be doing, and you're not going to want to compromise too much. And your way of doing things might be rather original. And I think that is a good thing. That's Moon in Aquarius. And you're helped by the fact that the moon is sextile the sun. And this allows you to exercise your power, but in a way which is not immediately obvious. The sun is, after all, conjunct the North Node, but from a Taurus perspective, Aries is quite a hidden sign. And so your power and the way you express your power may not be immediately obvious. And you're going to have to show, I think, a fair amount of discipline. You might want to tell people how wonderful you are. You might want to show off can relate in terms of your many achievements and your wonderful experience. But I don't think that's a good idea. I think you should say nothing and just do what you have to do. You will have this burning urge to show off, I think. I think that's going to be big. But you have to resist it. Because if you talk too much about yourself and what you can do and your brilliance, you will actually be weakening yourself. When things happen in the darkness, away from the bright lights, that's when they are strong. And sooner or later you will see the benefits of it. But yeah, don't shoot your mouth off. It's unnecessary, and I think it could be counterproductive. Gemini. It's another day when I think that you are feeling that you've got something to offer and that your ideas are really good. Indeed, your ideas are quite future orientated with the moon in Aquarius. And it's not just the moon in Aquarius, it's the fact that the moon is sextile the sun. So with the moon sextile the sun, that's moon in Aquarius, sextile sun in Aries, you have absolutely got something to offer, and you can be something of a trendsetter because you're really a couple of steps ahead of both your friends and enemies. And so the way you want to do things, people might catch up in a few weeks, maybe even in a few years. So do take advantage of that, but you don't have to keep things secret. When I was talking to Taurus, I was suggesting that secrecy might be important. Not here, not for you, Gemini, because at the moment I think that your ability to get on with other people, to talk with other people, to network with other people is extremely good. And indeed, I think that is what you should be doing with the Sun conjunct the North Node in Aries. It's asking you to make connections, to interact with your friends and associates, and to take into account their opinions. So you might think that you've got some wonderfully original idea, and I think you have, actually, but that doesn't mean to say that it can't be moderated. And that moderation can take place by discussing it. You tell someone about what you're planning on doing. They give you some feedback. They give you some constructive criticism. You make some changes, and that's something Geminis can do. Geminis are very good at making changes, and they're very good at getting constructive criticism. That's why, I'm a Gemini. I like to think I can take constructive criticism. When you write a comment on this YouTube channel, and even if it's a negative comment, I still read it. If it's constructive criticism, I will quite potentially take it on board. And that's the approach that we Geminis should be taking at the moment. Seeing how we can moderate our plans and ideas on the basis of what other people are saying. But criticism can always be tough. And at the moment, Geminis are in a slightly difficult position because although we need criticism and constructive engagement, there's a certain danger that we might overreact to a bit of negativity from the outside world. So if we're told something is not working, there might be a certain tendency to either resist it with arguments saying you're wrong, you don't know what you're talking about, or one might say, oh, you're completely right, I'm just going to give up on it. No point, I've seen the criticism. Geminis can do that. I can do that. You get some criticism, you've got a plan you've been working on for ages and ages, and you just give it up. That also can be how it works. So when you do get criticism, it's really important to take it in the right way and not to exaggerate. On one hand, resist the criticism. Fight back against it. The other person doesn't know what they're talking about. That's bad. On the other hand, to just get overwhelmed by the criticism and just to give up. So you can't go to extremes when you get constructive criticism. You've got to take the criticism on board, make some changes, and then continue with whatever you're planning. Though it's possible that some of your ideas and the way you come across, it's possible that you get criticism which is totally unhelpful. That criticism is more likely to come from someone who knows you really well, rather than a friend or a relative stranger. If you might find that people who know you really, really well just are not interested and just are negative for the sake of it. So take that into consideration and ask yourself who you want to talk to. It's the time to talk to your friends, your colleagues, but maybe you shouldn't, for example, talk to your family or your spouse, someone like that, because their approach just may not be helpful, and they may just want to shut you down without being remotely constructive. So be a little selective in who you discuss things with, but overall, with the Sun conjunct the North Node in Aries, discussion is important today, but it's just got to be with the right group of people. If you know someone too well, then there can be a problem, isn't it? Like isn't that thing in the Bible, like the prophet? A prophet is never recognized in the New Testament. A prophet is never recognized in their own village, and maybe it's a bit like that. For everyone else will think you're great, but amongst your own people, amongst people who know you really well, then they're just going to think, oh, it's just Gemini going off again. So do take that into consideration. Cancer. It's another day when I think you may be a little cautious. That's because the moon is moving through Aquarius, and from a Cancerian perspective, Aquarius can be a difficult sign. Aquarius and Cancer have nothing in common, and it's not entirely easy being where you are today. The temptation, not the temptation, but the tendency is to be quite detached and even unemotional with Moon in Aquarius. That's the Moon. That's your planet, ruler of Cancer, but it's in Aquarius, and that does feel uncomfortable, and you feel that you can't entirely relate to the world out there, and when you do try to relate to other people, you might actually find them irritating. They're doing stuff that you don't appreciate, and they may be surprising you, and you're not really in the mood for surprises today. So if people do something you weren't expecting, then you may not be happy about it. Indeed, if they say things you weren't expecting, you might react in a fairly negative way. I should say that you should try to be tolerant and not take people's words and actions too seriously. Just accept it and try to be detached, because the moon is in Aquarius. A bit of detachment could be very useful. It will protect you from getting emotionally involved in something which is really not worth getting emotionally involved in. At the same time, it's not a day for hiding. I mean, in a way, it feels like being a day for hiding. You feel that you don't really need to be amongst ordinary people. But I think there is a strong social element to today. And part of that is because there is a conjunction between the Sun and the North Node in Aries. And from a Cancerian perspective, Aries is at the top of the chart. I mean, if you're looking at this video, I don't know whether you're listening to me or whether you're looking at I don't know whether I'm just in the background or whether you are looking at the video. But if you want to look at the video, if you're not looking at the video, if I can just draw your attention to this, is that this is your chart from a Cancerian perspective, and you can see that all of the planets here are above the horizon. So above the horizon represents, when I say horizon, of course it's not horizon, it's the Cancer Capricorn line. So it's a very top-heavy chart. And because it's a top-heavy chart, it really is about the world out there. You have to respond to the world out there. And the Sun conjunct the North Node is about where you should be going. And as I said, from a Cancer perspective, Aries is a high-profile sign, and it's important that you get noticed and that your opinions are heard. And it's not just about talking, it's about acting. There are things you have to do. You may be doing them alone. If no one wants to follow your lead, that's not your fault. But the key thing is to start taking action. I think people will follow your lead once you get going on things, because fundamentally people trust you. And if you're doing something, then that must be the right thing to do. And yes, if you are working today, if you're working with other people in a social environment, don't just accept what other people are doing. Don't think you just have to have a quiet life and do things the usual way. It's a time for standing out, because something needs to be done differently. And if something is being done wrong, then I think it's important that you make everyone aware of this, although I'm aware that it depends on the situation. I don't, for example, want you to lose your job because you're too strident, but in a general sense, I think people need to know what's happening, and if something is not being done right, it's your responsibility to create the change. And this is certainly something you can do. The moon is in Aquarius. It is sextile the Sun in Aries. That sextile is very fortunate. From the depths of your being, you can create action, and it's going to be fortunate action, and it's going to be timely action. So if you understand what you're supposed to be doing, and you act in a timely way, then I think today you may be able to notch up a surprise success. Leo, it could be quite a hectic day because of the Sun. The Sun rules Leo. And as I said at the beginning of this video, when I was talking about the overall planetary picture, I mentioned that the Sun was not just conjunct the North Node, but the Sun was conjunct the Mars-Uranus midpoint and the Jupiter-Saturn midpoint. And of course, the Sun is your ruler. Sun rules Leo. So that conjunction, especially on the Mars-Uranus midpoint, could impact you in a major way. And you do have to be careful. The Mars-Uranus pairing is, often connected with accidents happening through hasty behavior. So in terms of your physical environment, do be careful. Be careful with machinery, be careful if you're driving. Don't do anything dangerous. If you have a dangerous hobby, for example, I don't know, climbing mountains, climbing cliffs, driving race cars. But I suppose if you're that kind of person, you're not going to be wasting your time listening to me because you've got things to do. But you never know. Anything dangerous should be avoided with the Sun conjunct the Mars-Uranus midpoint. Really, I would say the same for all 12 signs. I'm not really singling you out, but I think for you in particular, you should avoid doing anything dangerous. But there is a question about what about things that may be socially dangerous? Things that are not necessarily going to have an impact on your physical well-being and your life, but things that might isolate or embarrass you. Well, that is a different matter, because the Sun is conjunct the North Node. Sun conjunct North Node is where you are supposed to be going. And so where are you supposed to be going? Well, the Sun conjunct the North Node, it's on the Mars-Uranus midpoint. There is a suggestion there, Leo, that maybe you have to cause a stir. Maybe you have to do things or say things which get people's attention, and that attention may not always be favourable, but it depends on the situation. If people are stuck in their own bubble, just totally focused on their own world and their own interests, they perhaps need to sit up and listen. And the person to make them sit up and listen is you. And perhaps what you have to do is move away from the script. We all run our lives according to scripts, don't we? And we have scripts for other people. All the people in our lives, we expect them to behave in a particular way. And it's all very mechanistic. And when someone breaks the script, they get attention. And maybe today, Leo, you have to improvise. And when you start improvising with that Sun conjunct Mars-Uranus, I think that people will notice. And no, they might not like what you're doing, but perhaps it's something you have to do. Remember, Sun conjunct the North Node, you have a mission. Sun conjunct North Node in Aries, you have a mission to be assertive. You're perhaps trying to tell people something. There's maybe a sense of urgency there. The Sun is also conjunct the Jupiter-Saturn midpoint. The Jupiter-Saturn midpoint, as I've already said, is often connected with business and the economy. So maybe, Leo, as you think about the world in which you live and what's going on in your country, the country's economy, and what you see as future trends might be, you may take the opinion that action is required. And if you just keep going in the same old way, economic factors might undermine you. So, Leo, I think you have to perhaps consider the possibility that you have a message to deliver. And it's important that people understand it and that you can create some change. And the situation is further emphasized by the fact that there is a decile between Sun and Uranus. Sun is your ruler, it's decile Uranus. So if it's decile Uranus, that's talking about the kind of style you want to adopt. Sun decile Uranus is trying hard to have a a rather over-the-top revolutionary style, the kind of style that shakes things up. Yeah, it's not easy to shake people up. It's not easy to get their attention. It's easier, as I said, to follow the script, but maybe you just have to make a conscious effort to cause waves. Maybe not just to cause waves. Maybe you have to make a conscious effort to cause a tsunami. I know that's a somewhat tasteless thing to say in the light of there's just been a tsunami, hasn't there, around Taiwan and in East Asia, but that's what kind of came to mind. Maybe in your own way you have to cause your own tsunami so that people can really sit up and listen, and just listen to what you have to say, because right now you do have an understanding of what's going on in the world. Virgo, you do want things done in a particular way. You're not in a mood for surprises like yesterday. I think I've said pretty much the same thing yesterday. And you're looking for a structure and a pattern in which to organize yourself. I think you will find it, because the moon, while moving through Aquarius, is making a sextile to the sun. I think you're going to find it quite easy to find a routine for yourself, and also to tell other people about this routine. You'll make it clear that you want to lead your life in a particular way, and you're not really in the mood for people arguing with you or suggesting you might want to do things differently. But that doesn't mean to say that you have to have arguments. I think you have a basic confidence right now, or you should have a basic confidence in terms of how you are expressing yourself and signaling to the world out there. You'll give the impression that you know what you're doing. That's good. Though, I should point out that Mercury is currently aspecting the Mars-Saturn midpoint. Mars-Saturn as a pair can be a little negative, can be about self-doubt. And so, privately, Virgo, you might be wondering about whether or not you're doing the right thing. And perhaps you take the view that things could so easily happen which upset everything. But I would urge you to have some self-discipline. Just because you have a few negative thoughts about what you're doing doesn't mean to say that those negative thoughts actually have to be realized. It may be a time when you can just keep them to yourself and just focus on things that are constructive. I mean, I know it's sort of a bit of a truism that we should think positively. I mean, everyone's saying that, think positively. I think in your case today, I probably am saying be positive, because if you are negative, if you were to dwell on all the things that could go wrong, as you might, then you might actually bring yourself to a standstill. So I would urge you to create a structure that you feel comfortable with, create a routine. There's no harm in planning today out. Decide what you're going to do, I don't know, maybe in quarter of an hour segments. And then follow it through. Follow it through to its conclusion, and I think things will be fine. There will be disturbances though. Some people are going to try to knock you off track. I'm pretty confident that you can resist these disturbances, but still, people who should know better may encourage you to break your routine, to do something you were not planning on doing. And it's just important that you resist these temptations and that you don't overreact, because today, the moon is square Jupiter and it's square Uranus. That moon square Uranus could be overreaction. You see something that seems serious and you think, oh no, you've got to stop what you're doing and engage with this serious thing. And when you actually find out what's going on, you realize that it's completely trivial. Now, I'm not saying that serious events won't happen. I suppose they could happen. Sometimes serious events happen that really do need your attention. But chances are we're talking about events that seem serious but are actually not serious at all, and that you certainly shouldn't break your routine to deal with them. You just need to concentrate on what's important to you. And perhaps there are things you need to discover in your own quiet way. That's the right thing to be doing. There is a bit of discovery, but it's discovery I don't think that needs involve other people. That's it. I'm not saying it's going to be a particularly interesting day, all things being equal, but I think in a quiet way it could be very constructive. Libra. Venus is your ruler, and it is moving through the last degree of Pisces. And so with the moon, Venus moving through last degree of Pisces, that could represent a few issues. For one thing, Venus is conjunct Scheat. Scheat is a fixed star associated with accidents and water damage, particularly accidents relating to the sea or crossing rivers. And that means that you need to be a little cautious. Things connected with water should be avoided. And it's not just about not swimming or not going on boat trips. I don't think you should go swimming or on boat trips. Anything to do with planning water or plumbing, things relevant to water, all of that kind of stuff should be avoided, because where there's water, there's a problem with Venus moving through the last degree of Pisces. And also with Venus moving through the last degrees of Pisces, it's a reminder that you're in a changeover period. Venus is about to move into Aries. It doesn't move into Aries until tomorrow, unless you live in California. But in fact, it will move in very late in the evening. If you're in Chicago, I think Chicago will move at 11 p.m. In, Montana, 10 p.m. Venus will move into Aries. So it kind of depends on your time zone, but it's still going to be late, even if you are in the western part of the United States. So I think that in a functional sense, we can regard Venus as moving into Aries tomorrow. So I would advise you, therefore, not to make commitments today, because you don't have all the facts, and also you don't know how you're going to feel tomorrow. You might be in the mood for doing something today and not be in the mood for doing it tomorrow because of this sign change. So it's important, Libra, to just hold back and not commit yourself to any big changes today. And we should also remember that Mercury is retrograde. In fact, Mercury stays retrograde until April the 25th, I think. And so in terms of not making decisions, perhaps we should push it out much longer. But if it's a sort of more short-term decision, where are you making a decision today or tomorrow or the day after, then I would really suggest that you wait until tomorrow before really committing yourself. So what do you do today? What should you be doing today? On one hand, I think you should be collecting your thoughts. Is there something perhaps that you haven't finished? If there's unfinished business, then maybe this is a last chance to deal with it. If you wait until tomorrow, then you might have missed your chance. So do consider the possibility that there's something left over that needs to be fixed. But don't underestimate your creativity. The moon is moving through Aquarius after all. Aquarius, its moon in Aquarius is a very creative energy, particularly from a Libran perspective. And if you are doing something you really enjoy, try not to think about it too much. There is a danger that you think about it too much. If you think about it too much, things could get spoiled. You might be thinking, oh, well, are you really allowed to do what you want to do? Is this really what you should be doing? What about your responsibility? Maybe people won't like what you're doing. These kind of thoughts, it shouldn't take up too much of your time. There is something very constructive you can be doing today, something which you enjoy doing. And if you're enjoying doing something, then I do think that you should continue with it and not feel guilty about it. As far as social pressure is concerned, Librans always are concerned about what other people think and what other people are doing. Yes, there is a bit of social pressure. I mean, the sun is conjunct the North Node in Aries, your opposite sign. There is a pull to consider what other people want and what other people need. And I think you should bear that in mind. But maybe today you shouldn't worry about that too much, because this sun conjunct the North Node in Aries, it will still be around tomorrow. So if you've got an obligation to other people, you feel any obligation, then maybe you can pause and put that obligation on hold until tomorrow. Scorpio, you still feel that you don't really want to be out and about. Yesterday I talked about your sacred earth, sort of a slight sort of analogy, a vampire analogy. It's not quite so strong today, because yesterday there was a conjunction between the moon and Pluto. I think, today, okay, the moon and Pluto are still in Aquarius, but it's starting to break up. And I don't think you're quite so concerned about your sacred earth, but you still feel that you want your own space, that you really don't want to be heavily engaged with other people and their problems. Having said that, I understand. While I think I understand your concerns, you can have quite a powerful impact if you make the effort. You come over as, I think, quite an interesting and exciting person if you make the effort. I mean, if people can't see you and are not communicating with you, obviously they'll never know that you're an interesting and exciting person. But as soon as engagement happens, whether it's face-to-face or over the phone, it will be clear that you are powerful and that you can create change. And, maybe one reason why you don't want to associate with too many people today is because you feel there's no point. You've got an idea about the way they are, and you don't think you can change them. The reality is, Scorpio, that you are in a position to create change. Your actions will be noticed, and your words will be noticed. And in your own way, I think you're going to be pretty captivating. But your intuition is in some ways correct. You don't want to spend too much time with other people, particularly any one person. Reason being because there is a square aspect between Moon and Jupiter. Jupiter is in Taurus, and Taurus is your opposite sign, and that Jupiter is still making a conjunction to Uranus. So if you give people a chance, it's true, they could mess things up for you. So if you spend too much time communicating with someone or being in someone's company, then they're going to start shaking you up, and you're going to feel unsettled, and you're just going to want to retreat all over again. So engage with people for short periods of time, and during the time in which you're engaged with people, make sure that you are in control. And control really matters today, especially with the Sun conjunct the North Node. The Sun conjunct North Node is about having a well-organized environment and not allowing the forces of chaos to upset your concentration. It can happen. And the chaos is not necessarily going to come from other people. It could come from yourself. And the chaos could come from your own thoughts and your own feelings. They could send you in the wrong direction. What you need to do today is you need to just make things simple. That's what you should be doing, making sure that where you are, everything is clear, that there are no ambiguities. And if there is an ambiguity, something that isn't clear, then you need to make a special effort to sort out that ambiguity. Maybe you need to demand that someone explains something to you and makes it very clear to you. Just demand it if something's not clear. If you make a demand, then I think your demand will be answered, and that demand may be to an individual, maybe to an organization. Maybe you've got an official letter through the post that you don't understand. If you don't understand it, there's going to be a number on that letter. Call the number and find out what's going on. It will be much simpler than you expected. And really, Scorpio, that's pretty much all there is to say. I think it's a day that is slightly complicated, but whatever's going on, it's going to be okay, provided you're in control all the time. And of course, Scorpios understand that. Scorpios like being in control. Sagittarius, you're going to find it quite easy to get your message across, easier than yesterday. I think when I was talking about your sign yesterday, I was indicating that you might have felt that you had something to say, but it was difficult to actually get anything done. It was difficult to find people who would really listen to you. Things have changed. Things are changing now. I think with the Moon making a sextile aspect to the Sun, you're going to be communicating in a harmonious way that people will like. People will like what you have to say. It will be exciting, and they're going to want to pay attention to you. So if yesterday you failed to get your message across, then today people are going to be able to listen. People are going to listen to you, and they will understand what you are trying to say. But it's about people listening to you. I don't think that you have to spend too much time listening to other people. In fact, you shouldn't spend too much time listening to other people. If you were to listen hard to what other people were suggesting, then really it could be a wasted day, because if you're all things to all people, you're not going to get anything done. On the other hand, if you have a strong sense of your individual purpose today, and you ask yourself, what are you on this planet for? What are you good at? How can you put these talents into action? And you ask yourself those questions, and you actually do something about it, then it's going to be a great day. After all, the sun is conjunct the North Node in really a very creative part of your horoscope. And creativity, as I say quite often when I do these forecasts, I do emphasize that creativity is a solo project. You don't need anyone's help for genuine creativity. You certainly don't need anyone's advice. Today you don't need anyone's advice. So do what you feel you need to do in order to make the most of your many abilities, and you will be helped by the fact that the moon is sextile the sun. Moon sextile sun means that you can not just get your message across, but you can bring together all the resources you need in order to be successfully creative. And bringing together resources, that's surely what Sagittarius is all about. Sagittarius is everywhere. Sagittarius has an intuitive understanding of what's available in the world, not just in a material sense, but in an intuitive sense. And so you can bring everything together and really create something, I would have said, very special. And another thing about other people and why you shouldn't listen too hard to other people is that Mercury is the ruler of Gemini, your opposite sign. And Mercury is currently aspecting the Mars-Saturn midpoint. And Mars-Saturn as a pair can be really negative. All the reasons why you shouldn't do something. All the reasons why something could go wrong. And so if you spend too much time listening to another person, they could convince you that night is day and good is bad, and you could pick up on their negativity, and that really wouldn't be helpful. So yeah, don't spend too much time listening. It's a time perhaps for talking, but not really for in-depth listening. Capricorn. It's another day when you are thinking about money, I think. Capricorn is an earth sign. The financial dimension is often important to Capricorns. And yesterday you might have felt a bit uncomfortable about it because you were wondering where was it all going. But today the moon is making a sextile to the sun. And I think that from a Capricorn perspective, this sextile between the moon and the sun could be very useful. It could help ground you. It could give you an idea about what you can trust. So if you are engaged with financial issues, or you're talking about maybe your long-term security, or more thinking about your long-term security, planning your long-term security with moon sextile sun, I think you can do a lot of really good work. And you certainly shouldn't be pressured into doing anything you don't want to do. or going anywhere you don't want to go to. I think it's a day for Capricorns to be fairly selfish. I don't mean selfish in a bad sense. Selfish as in thinking about what needs to be done, taking the view that pressures from the outside world can be put on ice. You can deal with them at a later stage. And yes, when you are on your own or surrounded by people you know and trust, you can really do some useful stuff. And I'm thinking particularly of money, but it's all about security and making yourself feel secure. And it's actually about taking the initiative to make yourself secure. I suppose the people around you, even the people you know, trust and love, they don't necessarily understand the meaning of the word security in the way you understand it. Capricorns really understand the importance of security. And today you can, in a way, take the initiative with security. And if other people are involved in your own security, perhaps your family, you can get them to listen to you. You may be saying, well, we need to do this. If we are going to get through the next few months, years, whatever, then we need to do, then this is what we need to do. And getting through, it doesn't matter how much money you've got, how little money you've got. Everyone is trying to get through. And I suppose that's a sign of the times we're living in. And from a Capricorn perspective, however much money a Capricorn has, however wealthy a Capricorn is, Capricorn is still thinking that it could be perhaps taken away. And that's just Capricorn realism. And by really getting involved in that Capricorn realism today, I think that you could be making yourself feel a lot more comfortable. And don't worry about what other people are saying. If people are saying you're being boring, or, you should be doing something else, or even worse still, spending money on something else, spending money on something that's completely irrelevant, then I think that is a pressure that you can safely ignore. Aquarius. The moon continues moving through your sign in a way that I think is going to be more constructive than yesterday. Yesterday, we did have the moon moving through Aquarius, but it wasn't really doing anything in Aquarius. You were putting effort in, but really, were you making any progress? There was just nothing to apply to. But today, there is something to apply to. The moon is making a sextile aspect to the sun. So the moon in Aquarius is making a sextile to the sun in Aries. And that allows you to really engage with the world. You can talk to people. If you've got anything to contribute, then your contribution will be accepted and appreciated. And so you are going to be very much part of the world. But don't be too much of an Aquarian. By that I mean Aquarians often have big ideas. They like to perhaps run their lives according to certain principles, theoretical principles often. Remember, Aquarius is an air sign. But that's not the right approach. You have to look at the world as it is, not how you think it should be. You can have your dreams, and I understand with Pluto in Aquarius, you're starting to get ideas about the way the world should be. But don't take that too seriously. Look at the world as it is. Get information about what the world is really like. Yeah, and so in some respects, actually, today, it may be a bit of a fact-finding mission. There are things you need to know, and the things you find out may, in some respects, contradict some of your core beliefs. That shouldn't bother you. Just collect the information, gather it. Then, at a later stage, you can work out what needs to be done. And don't allow yourself to be disturbed, especially by members of your family, people who you know really well. They could be a bit of a problem. They may perhaps be encouraging you to do things in the same old way, not to take into account things that are obvious. And, if you spend too much time listening to your family or reacting to your family, and, when I say family, I'm also talking about people you know really well, people who are just part of your life. If you spend too much time reacting to them, then I think you could get nowhere. Instead, you do have to be independent-minded, but, as I've already said, you mustn't be precious about your ideas, your core ideas, because the facts that you learn today might actually contradict these ideas. So do take that into consideration. And at the same time, in terms of other people, particularly the people close to you, if you actually look at what they're doing and what they're planning, you might be a bit worried, because it may occur to you that they're not doing things right, that they may be exposing themselves to certain risks. And if you feel that way, then it's just important today to let them know about what they're doing. This is because the sun, which from an Aquarian perspective, the sun represents your 7th house, Leo. Leo's your 7th house. It's your opposite sign. The ruler of Leo is obviously the sun, and the sun is conjunct the Mars-Uranus midpoint. And so with the sun conjunct the Mars-Uranus midpoint, that may indicate that some of the people you come into contact with today could be irresponsible, they could be hasty, they want things done quickly. In the process, they may be taking risks and exposing themselves to unnecessary danger. And, when I say danger, I don't want to be over dramatic about it. That danger is likely to not be the kind of danger that they get physically hurt, but just danger, however you want to perceive that danger. And in that case, Aquarius, then I think that you have a certain responsibility to have a restraining influence. You're there. If you realize that someone's taking risks, then you're in a position perhaps to bring someone back from the precipice. Pisces. I think Pisces, there's nothing much that you have to do today. You've perhaps got your own plans, but is it important for the plans to be executed like now, this minute? I don't think so. There's still also quite a lot of reflection to be done. Things have happened over the last few weeks. It hasn't always made sense, and today would be a good time to start to sort of make sense of it, to make sense of it all, and to sort of use your feelings to understand why things are happening, or indeed why they're not happening, because there has been a bit of delay recently, and it hasn't been helped by the fact that Mercury is now going retrograde. I should also point out that the planet Venus is on the point of leaving your sign. So Venus is in the last degree of Pisces. It's about to move into Aries. Could this represent an opportunity that is about to end? It's possible that Venus represents something that is open for you. It could be a social opportunity. It could be a person. And the expiry is now happening. The opportunity is about to be over. So consider today, all the people and opportunities and things going on around you, and ask yourself, is there anything that's about to end? Because if there is, maybe you should reach out and tell someone you're there, or whatever you need to do. Because if you leave it until tomorrow, when Venus goes into Aries, you may have just missed your chance. So do consider that possibility. But it may be that there's nothing really going on. Venus moving from Pisces into Aries, it might just mean that you're going to be a little less sensitive than you have been recently. And that might be a good thing, because too much sensitivity can be overwhelming. You've got Mars in Pisces, you've got Saturn in Pisces, you've got Neptune in Pisces, you've got Venus in Pisces. So one planet moving out of Pisces, Venus moving out of Pisces, may actually be a relief. Yes, you might be a little less sensitive, but that might actually make the world a little easier, a little less complicated, and you're going to have perhaps a better idea of what your priorities should be. Maybe, for example, you're going to find it easier to concentrate on something like money. I mean, as I will be discussing, Venus moving into Aries from a Pisces perspective could have a financial implication. And remembering that today there is a conjunction between the Sun and North Node in Aries, in a sign that is very connected with Piscean finances. And with that Sun conjunct North Node, it may be the right thing to do now is to consider money in a very uncomplicated way. It's just looking at your overall financial situation, not making things more complicated than they have to be, and just accepting that something has to be done. And today, I think that you're starting to know what has to be done. Just one action could make your financial situation a whole lot better, I think. So now, having looked at today from a perspective of astrology, I want to consider it from a perspective of the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is Thursday going to be like for those watching the I Ching segment of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram 53, which is development, slow development. There's no hurry. We just have to slowly move towards our goal, and we shouldn't be impatient. Things will take time, and on that road there may be moments of insecurity. And in fact, that's probably what's going to happen in the first instance. We're trying to get something done, and we realize that it's all a bit over our head, and we need to pause. We just need to catch our breath. That's important. And the imagery there is of a bird trying to land on a branch and trying to find the right branch, a branch which is the right shape, somewhere where it can put both its feet. Birds have 2 feet. Is that what they call them? Anyway, the bird can perch on a branch safely. And not every branch is perchable. Some branches are unsafe, they're not the right shape. So we have to find the right branch on which to perch on in order to catch our breath. So that underlines the point, we mustn't be in a hurry. But then we can continue on our journey. And in terms of this gradual development, there may be a point where we actually feel that we're being misjudged, that people don't really understand what we're trying to say. And so it's very difficult to make further progress if we're just not being understood. We may even feel ignored. But we shouldn't worry about that too much, because if we keep going in a sort of gradual way, in the end, people will understand what we're trying to communicate, and we'll be able to communicate our needs, and then we can start to make further progress. And we've got 2 moving lines here with this hexagram, and this hexagram moves to hexagram 56, which is the Wanderer. Yes, we are trying to develop. We are trying to move in a particular direction, and it's a difficult task for us, because we may be starting to move into an area that we're just not familiar with, and that is the issue with the Wanderer. So consider whatever you're trying to do today, whatever's on your mind, and consider the possibility that you have become a wanderer or are becoming a wanderer. And that means being in an alien world, or perhaps you're engaged in a task that you're just not familiar with it. And you're just looking for a bit of security there. And the key thing to being successful as a wanderer is to actually understand your own position and your own vulnerabilities. You have to be modest, and you can't make assumptions, and you are trying to get on with the world around you, this alien world, but you need as many friends as you can get so that you can get eventually the support you need. And what the ultimate goal of a wanderer is to find home, find somewhere where they finally feel familiar, and that should be your goal. And in the process of finding that goal, finally understanding what you're trying to do, you've just got to be very modest about it. But with the right approach, the wanderer will find their spot. They will find their security, and in terms of whatever you're trying to achieve, I think you'll eventually get the support and advice that you need in order for there to be a successful conclusion to it. I'm not saying it's going to be easy, but the I Ching really does suggest that it is possible. The astrology, I want to look at 2 things in terms of the astrology of today. The first thing I want to look at is the tsunami or earthquake that took place in Taiwan. So there is a chart for this, and let me just have a look at the chart. This is a chart for this earthquake in Taiwan. I've set it for Hualien, Taiwan, but then I've changed the location, I've changed the coordinates very slightly to reflect the fact I think this happened out to sea. So I went to, there's some earthquake resource is it the Geological Survey? They tell you exactly where it happened. So I set the coordinates for where this happened. I'm not going to spend long on this, but you can see that Uranus was on the ascendant. That's the main thing. Uranus on an angle is a classic signature of an earthquake, although it's usually Uranus on the IC, because IC is the bottom of the chart, so you would think an earthquake, when it happens, it's happening deep underground. So Uranus on the IC might be a little bit better, a little bit easier to understand than Uranus on the ascendant. And when you're considering an earthquake, it's often a good idea to look at the prenatal lunation. So that would be the full moon before it happened. So there was a full moon on March the 25th, 2024. So this full moon might give us some hints. So if we look at this full moon, we can see that Uranus is exactly on the midheaven. Now, the thing about this full moon is that there's the full moon on March 25th. Moon was at 5-7 Libra. And Uranus was semi-square the sun and sesquiquadrate the moon. So that's perhaps why Uranus on the midheaven in Taiwan was so important. It's not just you had Uranus on the midheaven in the pre-event full moon. It was the fact that Uranus was semi-square the sun and it was sesquiquadrate the moon. I'll quickly look at this lunation from the point of view of astrocartography. So let's just look at a map of the world. So this red line. I'm not sure if you're going to be able to see it. Let me try and move this across, make absolutely sure you can see this red line. This red line, let me just move this window just to make absolutely sure you've got it. Okay, this red line, that's Uranus on the midheaven. You can see it goes through eastern Russia, goes through China, and then that's where it is relative to Taiwan. I think my knowledge of Taiwanese geography is absolutely zero, but you can see that it was pretty close to Taiwan, this Uranus on the midheaven. So perhaps when I was looking at that full moon, I perhaps should have pointed out Taiwan, but it would have been difficult to say precisely what was going on. Let me just show you that map and really home in on Taiwan, if this program will let me do this. So if we look at, there's Taiwan, and so there's Taiwan. I think the earthquake itself happened around here, but this is the theoretical line. So it was pretty close. And so I think that this is a reminder that if you want to try to predict earthquakes, difficult thing to do look at the new moon and full moon charts, particularly the new or full moon prior to the event, and set it up for different places in the world. If you haven't got a program that gives you astrocartography, then just set up charts for sort of the parts of the world that you might be interested in. And that's really all I wanted to say about the earthquake. I now want to consider the eclipse, which is when is it? The eclipse is on April the 8th. Everyone is really excited about this eclipse. They think it's going to be a really big deal. I wonder if it really is. Yes, I know it's a total eclipse. I know that one can see it from I think there's an arc in going through the United States. And so people think that just because you can see it in America, is that going to say that America is going to be uniquely affected by it? I mean, I've looked at those eclipse paths, and in my experience, they don't seem to work too well in terms of predicting events over that eclipse path. Okay, maybe someone is going to be born at the time of the eclipse who is going to have a big impact on the United States. Maybe some future president of the United States is being born right now, is about to be born as we speak. Remember the famous Muhammad eclipse path. So when Muhammad was born, there was an eclipse path which I think it started in northwest Africa, and went right through, and it stopped halfway through the border, halfway through. What's that place called? The island of Irian Jaya, that Indonesian island where the east side is. The west side is part of Indonesia, and that eclipse path seemed to delineate the extent of Islam, if I remember rightly. It's a long time since I read about that. So yes, so someone born at the moment can perhaps have an amazing amount of power, but we're not going to see that, are we, for decades? So it's a bit difficult to speculate. So this is the eclipse. I've said it for Westminster. So what's the big deal about this eclipse? Is it a good eclipse? It's in Aries. Sun-Moon conjunction, obviously, by definition, that's an eclipse. We always get a new moon in Aries every year. It comes at the same time as a Mars-Saturn conjunction. So a Mars-Saturn conjunction is forming. And probably if I was going to be asked what is the most significant thing about this eclipse, I would have said it's the fact that the Mars-Saturn conjunction is decile the Sun-Moon conjunction. So Mars and Saturn are, they are 36 degrees apart. So if we, for example, were to create a fifth harmonic chart, let me just show you what I mean by that, by a fifth harmonic chart. Let me create a harmonic chart. If I create the fifth harmonic of this eclipse, which makes all of the deciles, a decile will come over as an opposition. So if we look at this, I've just changed the harmonics of it. So from a harmonic point of view, that means that Sun-Moon conjunction, that eclipse, is opposition the Mars-Saturn conjunction. And I think that is the most important thing about this eclipse. It's the relationship through the decile, the fact that the Sun-Moon conjunction is decile Mars-Saturn. So I think that with Mars-Saturn, it's quite a destructive energy. It's almost like some people are going to be deliberately trying to cause disruption and death. There are some very malevolent people around with this decile between Sun-Moon conjunction and the Mars-Saturn conjunction. Because remember, the quintile is about style. The decile is about the attempt to create a style. So if you're attempting to create a style and you're trying to bring together a new moon with Mars-Saturn, you are trying to change the world through death and destruction. And so I would say that was the main theme about this eclipse. Bad players trying to make the world worse in order to further their agenda. And so, sure, we can think about war zones, as always, But it's not just about Ukraine or about Gaza. There are other places, and so I think that is the main theme about this. The main theme with this new moon eclipse. Let me just go back to the normal chart. Yeah, it is the thing that stands out. Now, I know what you're going to say is you're going to say, hold on, you've been forgetting about Chiron. And that is certainly dramatic. The fact that this new moon is exactly, this eclipse, this new moon eclipse, is, it's exactly conjunct Chiron. Sun at 1924 Aries, Moon at 1924 Aries, Chiron at 1924 Aries. Now, we have arguments about what Chiron might mean. And perhaps we're going to really find out what Chiron means with this new moon conjunct it. You could say something about, the wounded healer. So from our own perspective, because if you try to personalize this new moon, this may be a time when we are considering how we can have a positive impact on the world, how we can perhaps focus on our own wounds to make the world better. And the new moon, because new moons are beginnings, it's the start of a process. So for some people, if you're, say for example, you are planning on being a healer, maybe you want to do a course in herbal remedies or psychotherapy. You might be a student, you want to be a doctor, maybe. Depends on the situation. Now is a very good time to, over the next month, to really work out how you're going to be most effective in making other people's lives easier. And so I suppose the new moon would be telling you to start thinking about your own wound, and then move on from that and think about how you can leverage that wound to help other people's wounds. So if you've got any feelings about wanting to heal and moving in a direction of healing, it may be just people you know that need to be healed. Maybe your community needs to be healed. And I think that with that new moon conjunct Chiron, that would be a constructive way of using its energy. There is another way of looking at Chiron. And I do get some negative comments about this. People are questioning this. But as far as I'm concerned, very strong evidence that Chiron is a maverick. The discoverer of Chiron, I think what's his name, Charles Cowell, he used this word to describe Chiron because it has a maverick orbit. Remember, Chiron is a comet, and it has a very elliptical orbit. And so with the new moon conjunct Chiron, it can be about the maverick. This is about how we can be a maverick. How can you be different? Now, how can you accept that you've got something different to offer? Remember, this is new moon conjunct Chiron in Aries. This is about doing something different, not being worried about what the world is going to think of you. If you've got that unique view of the world that makes you a maverick, then now is the time to bring it out. That is your duty, and don't worry too much about embarrassing yourself or getting a negative reaction. So I think that is, to my mind, the positive and exceptional thing about this new moon eclipse. So there are two things that are exceptional. I think that there is the fact that this Sun-Moon conjunction is decile, the Mars-Saturn conjunction, and I do think that this is a time when we've got some very bad players out there in the world who are going to be trying their very hardest to make bad and violent things happen in order to push forward with their cause. And on a personal level, it's not so bad, because we've got more choice as people. As ordinary individuals, we have choices. Politicians, countries, they don't have so much choice. But as ordinary individuals, I think we can really tune into this North Node conjunct Chiron, and maybe it's going to be quite exciting to see how, on a personal level, this North Node conjunct Chiron is going to work. Then I want to look at this eclipse from the perspective of where is it most likely to have an impact. I'm not going to look at the eclipse path. My main priority is to know where are the big planets? Where is it happening? Where is Uranus on the midheaven, for example? Where are the trouble spots? So I am going to firstly set up the astrocartography for it, get an idea about what we should be looking at. Don't forget, there is a Mars-Saturn conjunction at the time of this eclipse. It's pretty close. And this red line, these are all the places on Earth where this Mars-Saturn conjunction is on the IC. And we can run this up. It goes through, Yemen, it goes through eastern Saudi Arabia, goes through the Persian Gulf, goes through Tehran, and then it goes up into Russia. Persian Gulf may be somewhere we have to look at. The Middle East, things are happening in the Middle East. It goes through Tehran. We just had this attack on the Iranian consulate in Damascus. How are the Iranians going to respond? Are they going to respond? And so with this going through the Persian Gulf, Mars-Saturn conjunction going through the Persian Gulf, I think there may be cause for concern in this area. So I would have said the Persian Gulf is somewhere I would really be looking at. We shouldn't forget, though, this area here. There's somewhere I don't know what's going on in Russia here. Let me just make this a bit bigger. Let's go to a map of where we can focus on Russia itself. Let's just look at. This is Western Russia. So there is Jupiter-Saturn conjunction, and there is Uranus. So there is a place. Mars-Saturn conjunction, So there is going to be somewhere, there's this, I think that's Samara, somewhere around here, Kazan, Samara, where is this? There is going to be a place where Uranus is on the ice, on the descendant, and the Mars-Saturn is going to be on the midheaven. And so something could happen here, perhaps, and if I were to be the Russian security services, I would be considering, for example, the possibility of a Ukrainian attack deep inside Russia that may be very significant around this area. So I would have thought the Russians should, probably the Russians don't believe in astrology. And, astrocartography is hit and miss, but it's better to be safe than sorry. So this is an area they should be considering in terms of some major Ukrainian attack going deep into Russia. That's just a possibility. So that's that. But another way of looking at this eclipse is to consider the midpoint of you've got Mars-Saturn. You see the Mars-Saturn conjunction here, and you've got a new moon here, which I think it's a fairly malefic decile, as I've already described. But where would a place be that had the midheaven right between the North Node and the Mars-Saturn conjunction? So I think I found the nearest place was, let me just relocate this. I'm relocating it to Kabul. So if you look at, this is a chart for Kabul, and there's MCIC. You've got Mars, Saturn on one side, you've got the new moon on the other side. So Kabul, in the capital of Afghanistan, could be the most dangerous place to be, all things being equal, with this total eclipse. Now, as I said, astrocartography is really hit and miss. I'm not saying anything will happen in Kabul. I'm just saying that Kabul is an area where, I don't know what challenges the Taliban have to do. They have to worry about ISIS, and even though the Taliban have taken over, there are still regular terrorist attacks. So, the authorities in Kabul really have to be extra attentive to detail. Of course, they don't believe in astrology, but let me just go through the line. You won't be able to see this line on the map, but let's just go back to a map of Asia. So there is Kabul. There's Kabul. So if we go down, so all the places that are on this meridian, we have to be careful. Yeah, you've still got areas of Russia that maybe one needs to be concerned about, even further east than before. But Kabul and Pakistan. So Afghanistan and Pakistan could, I think, be damaged by this eclipse. So those are areas where we should perhaps be watching. And really, that's all I've got to say about the eclipse. I think it could be dramatic, but it doesn't strike me as being super, super dramatic. There have been far more dramatic eclipses than that. So it is possible that this total eclipse that we're all so excited about is actually a damp squib, though from a personal point of view, I do think that that conjunction between a new moon and Chiron is really exciting, and we need to see how it works out. And that's it. Thank you very much for listening to me. Hope you found that of some interest. If you enjoyed this video, I would be grateful if you were to indicate that you liked it by pressing the like button. If you're not subscribed, I'd be really grateful if you were to subscribe, and if you want to buy me a coffee, there is a link in the description. So thanks again for listening, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.